4 days before Christmas, my daughter said 8 words that broke something in me I didn't know could still break. Dad, don't come. Michael says it's too complicated. I stood in my kitchen in Denver, watching snow fall outside the window, and felt my chest cave in. I was 62 years old. I had spent 37 years raising that girl, walked her to school, taught her to drive, paid for her college, danced at her wedding, and now her husband had decided I was too complicated for Christmas dinner. So I spent Christmas Eve alone at a steakhouse downtown, surrounded by families laughing over candlelight, trying to swallow food that tasted like cardboard. Halfway through the meal, a gray-haired man about my age walked over and asked if I wanted to join him and his wife. I said yes, thinking it was just holiday kindness from a stranger. I had no idea that single invitation would rebuild my entire life. 7 years later, my daughter stood in my living room with tears streaming down her face, and only then did I understand exactly what that one dinner had set in motion. My name is Robert. I'm 69 now, telling you this with 7 years of clarity I didn't have back then. I used to believe I was a good father simply because I worked hard, paid for everything, and showed up to every recital. I thought that was love. Sitting alone in that restaurant on Christmas Eve, I learned something painful. Being a good provider means nothing if the people you provided for don't actually want you around. The hostess had given me a sympathetic look and seated me by the window, away from the families, like she understood I didn't need their happiness in my face. I ordered a steak I couldn't taste. All I could hear was Sarah's voice on the phone, lowered like she was afraid Michael might catch her being kind to me. We'd done Christmas together for 5 years, since her wedding. I never caused trouble. I brought gifts, washed dishes, played with my grandson. I thought we were fine. It's just, his parents are coming, and the house is small, and everything that happened at Thanksgiving, she'd said. What happened at Thanksgiving was that I'd quietly disagreed with Michael about politics. Not loud, not rude. I simply said I saw it differently and changed the subject. He'd gone cold for the rest of the night, and I'd heard Sarah apologize to him 3 separate times. I'm your father, I'd told her. I haven't seen you since October. I just want Christmas with my family. The silence on the line had lasted long enough for me to hear Michael in the background, asking who she was talking to. Maybe next year, she'd said, like I was a magazine subscription she was deciding whether to renew. That's when Harold Gibson walked up to my table. Tall, kind-eyed, wearing a hand-knit cardigan, his wife Margaret standing a few steps behind him. I couldn't help noticing you're alone tonight, he said. We have a table for 4 and it's just the 2 of us. Would you like to join us? Every instinct told me to protect my privacy, to suffer quietly the way men of my generation were raised to. But there was no pity in Harold's face, just plain human recognition, one lonely man reaching toward another. Margaret stepped forward. You wouldn't be intruding. Our children are scattered across the country this year. It's just us and too much food. I looked at my half-eaten steak, at the empty chairs, and said yes. That first dinner lasted 3 hours. Harold had been a high school principal for 30 years, Margaret a nurse, and later a nursing instructor. 3 grown kids, 7 grandchildren, scattered everywhere. Holidays used to be chaos, Margaret laughed. Now they're quiet. We're still learning what quiet looks like. Somehow I ended up telling them everything. About Sarah, about Michael, about the phone call 4 days earlier. Harold didn't try to fix it. He just said, that's hard, and let it sit there. It was exactly what I needed. When the check came, Harold paid over my protests and said, consider it a gift. If you're free next Sunday, Margaret makes the best pot roast in Denver. Margaret was already writing their address on a napkin. 6 o'clock. Don't bring anything but yourself. I drove home through the snow feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That Sunday became the first of hundreds. Their house was full of books, photographs, and the smell of something wonderful cooking. I met their son David, his wife Lisa, and their kids Emma and Marcus, who adopted me instantly as an audience for dinosaur facts and astronaut firefighter career plans. What struck me most wasn't the food. It was the way this family talked over each other with affection instead of irritation. The way Harold reached for Margaret's hand during quiet moments. The way the kids were included instead of shushed. This was what family was supposed to look like. This was what I'd always wanted with Sarah. A year passed. Then another. Sunday dinners became the fixed point my whole life rotated around. I taught Marcus chess, helped Emma with science fair projects, and Margaret swore I had a magic touch in her garden. Meanwhile, I didn't hear from Sarah at all that first year. No birthday call, no Father's Day, no Christmas. I sent gifts for my grandson Ethan and got a 1-line thank you text. I called twice. She was always too busy, always promising to call back. She never did. The silence hurt every day. But now, the pain lived alongside something new, belonging. The Gibsons weren't replacing my daughter. Nothing could. But they were teaching me I could be loved without earning it, that I could matter to people with no obligation to care about me at all. About 14 months in, I found Margaret alone in the kitchen, crying into a pot of soup. Her sister Dorothy had died that morning. They hadn't spoken in 11 years, ever since a falling out over their mother's estate. And now it's too late, Margaret said. All I can think about is everything I should have said. She looked at me, eyes fierce through the tears. Whatever is between you and your daughter, don't let it stay broken until it's too late. Pride isn't worth it. Being right isn't worth it. Time runs out, and then all you have are regrets. I thought about those words for weeks. I thought about them when I drove past the card store and almost went in. I thought about them when Ethan's birthday came and my gift went unacknowledged. But the rejection was still too raw and I stayed frozen. Then, 2 years after that first Christmas Eve, my phone rang. Sarah. Her voice sounded thin, rehearsed. Michael and I are having problems. The business isn't doing well. We're behind on payments. There's this debt we need to clear before the bank. She stopped herself. Dad, I need $60,000. Michael says if we just get through this quarter, everything stabilizes. Michael says, I repeated slowly. When did we last actually speak before today? Silence. 2 years of nothing, I said, and now you call needing money, and suddenly I exist again. That's not fair, she snapped. Things have been complicated with Michael and his family. I know, I said. I'm too complicated. I've been invisible for 2 years, Sarah, and now you need something, so here I am again. She was crying now. Doesn't that mean anything to you? And God, it did. She was my daughter, my only child, the person I had loved most for 39 years. But she was also the person who'd chosen her husband's comfort over her father's presence, who'd let 2 years pass in silence and only called now because she needed something, not because she'd missed me. I love you, I told her. I have always loved you. But I can't give you $60,000 because it won't fix what's actually broken. Because Michael will find another crisis next year and another after that, and I'll become the man who bails him out until there's nothing left. And you haven't asked how I am in 2 years, and you're not asking now. So you're choosing money over your own daughter? That's who you've become? No, I said steady, despite the shaking in my hands. I'm the father who learned that love isn't the same as being used. I have people in my life now who show up because they want to, not because they need something. I'm choosing to be valued instead of just needed. Her voice went cold. You know what, Dad? Michael was right about you. Selfish underneath the nice guy act. I defended you for years. Not anymore. Don't call me. Don't text me. As far as I'm concerned, you've made your choice. The line went dead. I stood there waiting for the devastation to hit. It did, but mixed with something unexpected. Relief. I had finally stopped pretending, finally told the truth, and my daughter had shown me exactly who she'd become. Or maybe who she'd always been, and I'd simply refused to see it. That night, I drove straight to the Gibsons, even though it wasn't Sunday. I told them everything. Margaret took my hand. You did the right thing. Boundaries aren't abandonment. Remember that, Harold said quietly. You didn't lose her today. You lost her a long time ago, piece by piece. Today you just let yourself see it. He was right. I'd been erasing myself for years to make room in her life, and she'd let me disappear without ever once asking me to stay. 5 years passed without a word. No birthdays, no calls, no photos of Ethan growing up without knowing his grandfather. I learned about her life the way strangers do, a mutual friend's mention, a glimpse online I made myself stop looking for. She and Michael worked through the money trouble somehow, moved to a bigger house in the suburbs. Life went on with me carefully edited out of it, but my life went on too. I retired from engineering and started teaching computer skills to seniors at the community center. I became an unofficial member of the Gibson family, present for every birthday, every holiday, every Sunday without fail. Emma started high school and still asked for my help with science projects. Marcus discovered a love of cooking, and he and Margaret invented increasingly wild dishes while Harold and I pretended to be terrified. I was happy, not the desperate happiness of a man who'd escaped loneliness, but the quiet, settled happiness of a man who'd found where he belonged. Then, on a Thursday morning in March, a number I didn't recognize called, while I was helping a woman set up a video chat with her grandkids. This is Dr. Williams at St. Mary's Hospital. Your daughter, Sarah Chen Mitchell, is here. She listed you as her emergency contact. There's been an accident. The drive took 45 minutes and felt like 45 hours. Harold and Margaret met me there without being asked twice. Sarah was in the ICU. A drunk driver had run a red light. Broken pelvis, fractured ribs, internal bleeding, emergency surgery. Michael stepped out of the room just as I arrived. We passed each other in the hallway without a word. Ethan, 12 now, sat in the waiting room with red-rimmed eyes, looking at me like he was trying to place a face he almost remembered. "Grandpa," he said, hesitant, "Mom talked about you sometimes. She said you were busy, that's why you didn't visit." I opened my mouth to correct him, then stopped. What was the point? With his mother in the ICU, he just needed someone there. "I'm not busy anymore," I told him. "I'm right here." The weeks that followed were a blur. Sarah's recovery was slow. Michael, it turned out, had to travel for work and couldn't take time off. His parents were too far and too old to help, so the task of caring for Sarah fell to me. The father cut out of her life 7 years earlier. I moved into their guest room, drove her to physical therapy, cooked, cleaned, took Ethan to school and soccer. I did everything a father does, while Sarah watched me with an expression I couldn't read. 3 weeks in, late one night, she called my name from her room. I found her sitting up, pale, having been crying. "I keep replaying the accident," she said, "the sound of the impact. I thought I was going to die, Dad. And do you know what I thought about, in the ambulance? The last thing I ever said to you. Don't call me. You've made your choice." Those were going to be my last words to my father. She broke down completely. I was so wrong about everything. "Michael told me you were selfish, controlling, that you only cared about money. And I believed him because it was easier than admitting I'd pushed you away, that I'd let him push you away, that I was too weak to stand up for you when it mattered. Sarah, no, let me finish. These past 3 weeks you've been here every single day. Michael's called maybe 4 times. And you, the father I told to get out of my life, you moved in and took care of me and my son without one complaint, without asking for anything. That's not just what fathers do, Dad. That's what good fathers do. And I threw it away for a man who can't even come home when his wife almost dies. I want to meet them," she said finally. "The people who've been your family while I was too stupid to see what I had." 2 months later, once she could travel, I drove her to the Gibson house, heart-pounding. What if they resented her? What if the two halves of my life didn't fit? I shouldn't have worried. Margaret opened the door, looked at Sarah standing nervously behind me, and pulled her straight into a hug. "You must be Sarah. I'm so glad you're finally here. I made your father's favorite lasagna." Emma broke the ice asking about Sarah's design work. Marcus wanted to see her portfolio immediately. By dessert, Sarah was laughing at Harold's terrible jokes. On the drive home, she was quiet a long time, then said, "I understand now why you kept going back every Sunday. They don't need anything from you, Dad. They just want you there. I didn't know how to give you that, but I want to learn." 6 months later, Sarah filed for divorce. It was messy and expensive, and she came out of it stronger than I'd ever seen her. She and Ethan moved to a smaller house closer to Denver, closer to me, closer to the Gibsons. These days, Sunday dinner has a few extra chairs. Sarah brings the salad. Ethan argues basketball with Marcus. Michael is a name we don't really discuss anymore. And I sit at that crowded table looking at the family I chose and the family that finally chose me back, feeling something I didn't know I'd been missing all those years: wholeness. Last Christmas Eve, 7 years after that lonely dinner at the steakhouse, I stood in Harold and Margaret's living room with a glass of wine, watching 3 generations, blood and chosen, laughing together. Sarah caught my eye across the room and raised her glass. "Thanks for not giving up on me, Dad, even when I gave you every reason to." I thought about all of it then: the rejection, the silence, the phone call asking for money, the accident that finally cracked her open, the slow work of rebuilding what we'd both nearly destroyed. "That's what fathers do," I said, "the good ones anyway." And Margaret, listening from the kitchen doorway, smiled and said, "That's what family does. All of us. If you're struggling with family right now, the one you were born into, or the one you're building, hear this: it is never too late to set a boundary. Never too late to reach out. Never too late to accept an invitation from a stranger who sees something in you worth saving. Family isn't obligation or blood or shared history. It's choice. It's showing up day after day, not because you have to, but because you want to. Harold Gibson chose to invite a stranger to his table on a cold Christmas Eve, and because of that, I found everything I didn't know I was looking for.